I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. In 2012, we reviewed an album called A Church That Fits Our Needs by Lost in the Trees. It was our favorite record from 2012, and I think deservedly so. Just one of the most emotionally engaging albums written in the history of music, I think. I mean, it was a concept record about the lead singer of Lost in the Trees, Ari Picker, main kind of songwriter in the folk pop group Lost in the Trees, you know, constructing this album that's supposed to be kind of this proverbial like grave for his mother who committed suicide. So you have lots of lyrics there's lots of lyrical themes about gold and death and eyelids and all sorts of things that are just, all the tracks are referencing one another. It was just a beautiful piece of music, and it was hard for us to ever get over that. And I think Lost in the Trees, that was their second record. Now we're going to review their third record for you today, which is Past Life. A big change in sound.
Definitely.
And kind of a different take on their entire band, which I think had to have been a challenge. I think coming off of A Church That Fits Our Needs, they knew that they had to do something to change their sound.
And that's what I've been looking forward to. Right after we got done reviewing A Church That Fits Our Needs, I thought, where are these guys going to go from here? Because they put out this album that I don't know how music could mean any more to the songwriter than that album did. I mean,
it's one of the most emotionally terrifying and gripping things.
I just picture the leader of this band, after they get done with that, being like, well, crap, where do I go from here?
What do we do? What's next?
What's next? Exactly. So, well, what is next? In Past Life, we have a big change in sound. They are incorporating a lot more kind of electronics into there. On A Church That Fits Our Needs, we saw a dominating kind of string orchestral presence.
I would say orchestral. I mean, the thing about A Church That Fits Their Needs, there are three things that define the sound to me: rhythm, in the drums and the guitar, but also acoustic guitar, and then orchestral string arrangements that just kind of flourished on every track. And then also Ari's vocals, which are just fantastic. He has a very high voice that actually does sound pretty feminine, to be honest. I didn't know the first few times listening to that album that it was a male singer until later on. He has a very good voice, so it fits the music well. His voice is still on this record. It's still very much like that melodic focal point. But this record's very different in the fact that they just stripped down the sound so much.
Oh yeah.
They're incorporating more, you know, it's a more colorful sound. They're incorporating different instruments. There's a lot of piano on this record. A lot of, and I mean at times there's still strings, but they're more subtle. Electric guitar, though.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of electric guitar on this record.
Electric guitar. A lot of kind of electronic flutters. The beats sound a little more kind of arranged to, I don't want to say drum machine, but, you know, because there definitely is, just in the way that they're played, a little bit more of a live performance aspect to it. And who knows, that could have just been in the way that it was all set up. I don't know, I wasn't there for the making of the record, I'm just thinking about how it sounds.
Sure.
But one thing, too, is, I want to say, this reminded me a lot of the change that we saw in Antlers between Hospice and Burst Apart. And I think if you think of it from that context, it makes a lot more sense, because you have this album, you know, an expansive, more kind of organic sounding album, and then they move things in a different direction. I know a lot of people didn't like Burst Apart, and a lot of people really did like it. You know, obviously they're not the same records, but it's a change in mindset and it's a change in sound that you're either going to welcome or you're not. Now, for me, what matters more than the change in sound is how they're matching their songwriting with that.
I totally
agree. And
agree.
album construction. I think album construction is actually even a bigger change than individual songwriting tactics that they're using, because this album it's pretty short.
And it's a straight through listen, whereas The Church That Fits Our Needs was two movements.
Yes, it was the movements. It was kind of segmented. It told that story. This is much more concise. It's much more compact. I feel like they fit a lot into that short amount of time, but they're not trying to be expansive with the kind of horizontal direction that the album goes in. They're trying to be more expansive with what you hear at any given moment.
Yeah, kind of like Warpaint, which we reviewed a couple of reviews ago. They're creating a space with the sound. They're doing it by focusing on rest. They're focusing on providing moments of emptiness in the individual tracks. You know, Lady in White, track 3, it's a very quiet sound at times. I mean, you have the strings that kind of build up and then disappear, then all that's left is just that bass line. I mean, that song, I mean, is a perfect example of what Lost in the Trees is trying to do and where they're going with their sound. It creates this different kind of emotional appeal, because a lot of times you'll hear hear nothing but a beat in Aries' voice. I mean, that's a huge change from the orchestral swelling you heard on the last record. But it's a totally different take on it. Now, the question is how do they execute it? And I think that they do just a fantastic job. Because really, I mean, the first track, Excus, however you say it. I don't know how to say it. Past Life, the title track, and then Lady in White. Those three tracks right in a row. Very emotionally gripping and very well written. This album is much more, you can tell they spent much more time in the studio just producing the shit out of this. There's a lot of subtle electronics in the mix now that kind of give the album a more color. I mean, the idea of this is to have a different sound and to convey a different emotional message. And I think that they accomplished that. I mean, we picked, I think, collectively all but 3 tracks on this album. So 70% of this album we loved. That's what it comes down to. And the fact of the matter is that the back half of this album may not be as strong as the front half, but I think that the front half is good enough that it actually carries you through. I think this album actually makes a bigger statement as one piece of music than it does individual tracks, though.
Definitely, yeah. The sum is more than, or, you know, the entire thing is more than some of its parts, really.
Yep, and the last couple tracks are very good as well, Night Walking and Upstairs. Overall, this is just a very balanced record. I don't think that, you know, they're ever going to eclipse A Church That Fits Our Needs. There's just, I mean, like, the lyrics here, while I always enjoy Lost in the Trees lyrics from any of their 3 records, I never feel like on this record that I'm totally being swept away by the lyrics themselves. And that is a change. True. And you know, it's hard to expect that every time out. So I don't. And I just enjoy the music, because the music is what's lush on this record. And I think between Aries' vocals and the arrangements that they make, this is just a pretty darn good record.
Yeah, it is.
What are you going to give it, Tom?
I'm going to give it an even 80.
Okay, I'm going to go 84. So that puts this in the low 80s for Lost in the Trees, Past Life. If you guys have not listened to Lost in the Trees, we highly recommend it. This is a lesser-known band that we just stumbled upon one of their records, and it happened to be our favorite record of 2012. Past Life, if you haven't heard of Lost in the Trees, this is a great record, I think, to get you introduced to this band. Keep in mind, it's different from their other works, but it's still worth your time, especially if you've never heard this band. It's a great entry point. Go out, get Past Life, let us know your thoughts. www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what albums you'd like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
My heart pumps blood.